when I look at someone like Bob Lazar, and Bob Lazar, I would think of him more as an extremely sophisticated engineer rather than a theoretical physicist. And I think that he considers himself to be an engineer, but I could be wrong. Either way, he looks at it as technology. And many of the interviews with UFOs, they talk about technology. Now, I see it from a theoretical physics standpoint. I don't see technology. I see new fundamental physics. Yeah. And I'm curious. I'm so curious if any of this is true. Well, there's breakthroughs for a potential theory of everything. For example, there's something called SO10, which is and flipped SO10, which is a unification of the weak and electromagnetic and strong force, but it doesn't incorporate gravity. And it's a pretty good theory. But I heard Lazar refer to the strong force as gravity number 2, something like that. Now that, like, I would love to explore. But either way, I think that you have some, it might not be mathematical, but you have some ideas as to what possible new technologies, new physics exist. And I just want to speculate like mad here.
Yeah, the physics of it's amazing, but let's back way the fuck up, for your audience. People might not know. So let's start with this. So my name is Jeremy Corbell. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I make, investigative documentaries. I recently released one that was a Netflix smash hit, went all around the world, hundreds of millions of views. I went on the Joe Rogan podcast 3 times with 3 different individuals that I brought with me that all relate to this topic of UFOs. The man you mentioned, Bob Lazar, in case people don't know, Bob Lazar is the man, he's the reason why in the public consciousness, about Area 51 and flying saucers. Bob Lazar is the reason for that. He came forward in 1989, over 30 years ago, and talked about how our government, the United States government, was attempting to reverse engineer these extraterrestrial machines from other worlds, and that he participated in that attempt to reverse engineer those spacecraft. People called him a fraud, a liar. They tried to dig into his personal life and, decide that he's not telling us the truth about UFOs because he ran a brothel or, all this crazy shit. But bottom line is, after 30 plus years, Bob Lazar's story stands true. He did exactly what he said he did. Now, people don't need to believe that. There's a much bigger picture going on here. The big picture is this. Does our government, the United States government, or world governments, do they have craft from other civilizations, advanced civilizations that are technologically more advanced and operate in the realm of physics that is beyond our understanding? That's the question. Bob Lazar has always said, I can't prove everything in my story, but over time you'll see it's true. And the big thing for Bob was that Bob is a scientist. So the big thing for Bob was the science and technology that's being held back from humanity that are represented in these craft. Now, we couldn't replicate them. We couldn't reproduce them significantly in any way because the material science was the number one thing that held us back. But we did get an understanding how they operate, how they use gravity wave amplification to traverse space-time. All of this sounds like science fiction if I was talking to you 5 years ago. But in December of 2018, there was the announcement that the United States government had a program called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. This program was tasked with identifying and tracking and trying to observe the flight characteristics and patterns of what we call UFOs, non-terrestrial vehicles. So it has been admitted that the United States military is investigating the UFO problem and that they've been doing so actively. There was another program called AWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. This was the mother program that housed the ATIP program. New York Times came out and said these programs are real. And not only that, but we have fighter pilots like Commander David Fravor, who came forward, who chased a UFO for the United States government. I was the person that was able to get him first on record, long form audio coming forward. Also first filmed interview coming forward. I also got the guy, Chad Underwood. He is now Commander Chad Underwood. He's the guy that filmed the Tic Tac UFO, the now famous Tic Tac UFO. So that's kind of the brief history of what's been going on with Bob Lazar and UFOs. But we're now at a place we understand how they work. It is not against our physics how they work. We have to reimagine what we don't understand about physics. It's gravity wave amplification.
Okay. At times, I'm going to slow you down or ask you to repeat because I don't know too much about this. I have a brief foray into the UFO phenomenon. So when you say ATIP and OSAP and so on, I might get you to repeat them. One for our audience, but two for me to write down to ask you some more questions and to investigate later. I just learned about John Lear today. So I was just watching some of your, I think it was episode 1 about John Lear.
Yeah, I abandoned that project a while ago. I filmed with John for about 8 years, 7 or 8 years. And, he's the godfather of conspiracy. He's not the touchstone of truth that I go to about the UFO thing. He's wild. But as an individual, I really liked him, so I filmed with him for, about 7 or 8 years.
Right. John Lear mentioned that he saw some object on the moon. Do you recall what he's referring to?
John Lear has told me a lot. John Lear has told me a lot of things, people living on the sun, that kind of thing. I would not take anything that John Lear says as, a touchstone of truth for the UFO topic. He is as fringe gets. I didn't document him because I believed him. I documented him because he's a character. He's the son of William P. Lear, inventor of the Learjet and the 8-track stereo and Motorola company. And he's an interesting guy. Bob Lazar stands aside. Bob Lazar was an employee hired through EG&G to work at a subbase of Area 51 called Site 4, where he was tasked specifically with the power and propulsion of these non-terrestrial craft and trying to back engineer them.
Who else do you find credible? There's Bob Lazar, John Lear, no. David Fravor, and then you mentioned the guy who actually took the video of the Tic Tac.
Yeah,
who else?
There's a lot of people in the UFO field, right? But there's individuals who are kind of keystones along the way. Why Commander Fravor is so credible? Because he's a trained observer. He's a fighter pilot with more hours than anybody that was out on that mission, right? And not only did he engage this tic-tac shaped UFO that defied our known physics, its propulsion system was a reactionless system. Usually things push something out the back and they go forward. This had none of that. It was a gravitational system. You could tell by the acceleration, the lack of the sonic boom, the instantaneous control, turns and speeds. So Commander Fravor is a trained observer who came forward both in briefings to Congress, private briefings to Congress, as well in intelligence reports, and then publicly once I was able to really bring him out. He is credible because of who he is. And then, of course, there were other witnesses, and that's what makes for a good UFO case. There are other trained witnesses, and we have footage of that one. It's one of the famous 3 videos that was released by the Pentagon showing the world public that UFOs exist, they're flying with impunity in our airspace, and they've been here a long time. So, this is not...
When you say impunity, you don't mean that they're exempt from punishment. They would try to punish them if they could. It's just that we can't do anything about it.
We can't do a thing about them. If you look at the 1952 flyovers in Washington, D.C., a very famous mass sighting that occurred on multiple weekends, and all the newspapers came in.
Sorry, what was that? Do you mind repeating that?
It's 1952 flyover of Washington, D.C. It's a mass UFO sighting that was covered on multiple weekends. We scrambled jets, fighter planes, and they literally could not catch up with these objects, with these craft. So when I say flying with impunity, what I mean is that there is a technology that somebody has, an aerospace technology, and that we are incapable of defense or offense when we try to compete with the maneuverability of these craft. This is something that has been occurring a long time. Additionally, there are incursions on military bases, documented incursions on nuclear bases, where these vehicles, these craft, have come in and have shut down our nuclear weapons. This happened at Maelstrom Air Force Base. There's a guy named Robert Salas, who is the man in the Minuteman bunkers. And he actually is a friend of mine, and we've gone through the case. It's now public. And this is something to know, that not that these things are hostile, just that they are much more technologically advanced than anything that we have. We work on reactionary propulsion systems. You know that? All airplanes, all aerospace, we still use the same rockets to get up out of Earth's orbit that we did 50 years ago. So this is a different technology. This represents not only a different technology, but this represents possibly a different advanced culture. And it's not something you can get around. The evidence is so weighty for so long that if people don't know about it, they haven't been paying attention.
What do you think is the reason for the visitation?
Oh, I have no idea. No idea. I could theorize all day long, man. Maybe they like our truffles.
Well, here's one. Here's one reason why I used to not believe, and now I'm not saying I do believe. It's just that I remain open.
It's not a matter of belief,
unconvinced.
brother. It's not a matter of belief. It's true whether you want to believe it or not. I mean, there's documented cases, more evidence for this than there is for most things on planet Earth. There's more incursions. There's more evidence of UFO presence than almost anything. There's so many cases over so much time with so many credible witnesses. Now we have film footage, radar footage. It's not a matter of belief.
So why do you think that they look somewhat like us, that they're a hominid, that they have two eyes, that they have two, there's something called convergent evolution, but it's not as if all intelligent species must converge to be like us. So I'm curious, why do you think it is that they look similar to us?
I don't mean to be coy, but I don't know that they do. And the reason is when you first start looking into UFOs, you get all these ideas. You're like, they must be from other planets. Why are they visiting here? That's like, UFOs 101, the first thought you got. Then you're like, oh, they've been represented to look kind of hominid, whatever, bipedal creatures. The more you look into this, the more you realize all of that is not supported with the evidence. It turns out we don't know if these craft are from other solar systems or if it's stranger than that, if it's a dimensional reality, if these things are popping in and out somehow of our dimension, into our dimension. We don't know. We are so far behind in understanding it. Certainly, hard physical craft makes you think they're from other planets. For sure, could be. Maybe they're looking at us like they would livestock, like a commodity. Maybe they have some investment in the human species for some reason. And this is why they show or flex on the powers of our nuclear weapons, which they've done a lot. Additionally, the other thing that
what do you mean when you say that? You mean that when we have done nuclear tests, the UFO sightings have increased?
So there's a lot of information and evidence of the UFO phenomenon engaging our nuclear process. So everything from coming into very famous cases, like I mentioned before, Maelstrom Air Force Base. There is a UFO, a disc that came in and shot a beam of light down into the nuclear silo. And again, don't believe me. This is documented fact. This came out through FOIA. This came out through Information Acts. And it shut down our nuclear weapons. It was a display of power. So why are they doing that? Right? And they're not only doing it to us. There's also documented cases in Russia at the same time, at the height of the Cold War. So obviously there's some sort of message being sent where whoever's occupying these craft, whoever's piloting these craft, whether it be a physical being or an artificial intelligence, whatever's piloting these vehicles, they're showing us, hey, we can shut down your nukes at any time. So I would suggest everybody look into that. So you don't just look at this guy and say, oh, a crazy guy told me this. Look into it. This is something that is verifiable fact.
And if any of you who are listening are somewhat specialized in the UFO field, if you don't mind putting some of the sources, because I can't get to them all, that'd be great. And then I can link them in the description. Okay, continue.
Yeah, and then I just want to touch upon what you said, because we're going through this zeitgeist of like what UFOs are. So people are like, oh, they're from other planets. I am unconvinced. The more I learn, I'm unconvinced this is a phenomenon of just other people from other star systems coming here. The evidence does not suggest that when you really look at the totality of the evidence. It's not just flying saucers, shapeless saucers. We have all shapes and sizes of vehicles that shouldn't be existing in our skies. Again, Commander Fravor chased a Tic Tac shaped UFO. There's a very famous case called the Phoenix Lights, and this is a mass sighting of a triangular shaped craft, like a mile wide. We don't have anything like that in our arsenal. And people that you speak with who actually saw it, I interviewed a doctor and a lawyer, husband and wife, who saw it. And this thing came over, it touched mountain to mountain. So it was over a mile wide. And when it came over them, totally silent, it was like as if there was a bubble around them of silence, like all the crickets stopped, everything. And they're looking at what would have been the bottom of this thing, and it looks like waving of glass, like they can see the stars through it. And there's a lot of reasons, that you can see different optics when you see these craft, because of how they're powered, how they distort, how they navigate is through a propulsion system based on gravity. And as we know, gravity distorts time and space. So you can get an optical illusion just looking up at these things. Back to the beings, because this is always exciting. People will say, well, they look like us, they're bipedal. No, that's not true. There are so many cases of the grays, right? That's what you're referring to, this popularization of the gray alien. And yeah, a lot of people have seen that. Betty and Barney Hill were the first abduction case to identify this type of being in the pop culture. However, there's been a lot of reports of different types of operators of these craft. They look very different than that. So I can't say for sure that we're being visited by another planet. I can't say for sure that these things look a certain way. Again, these could be artificial cyborg intelligences that are just being controlled by a super intelligent AI. We don't know who's controlling and piloting these craft. They could be drones.
When you say that it's not necessarily from outside of our solar system, then do you mean that it's us in the future? Or do you mean that it's, when you say another dimension, I'm unclear. So please speculate away.
I'm unclear. I don't even know what another dimension means. I'm not that smart. I just know that the evidence doesn't suggest that this is just people from Zeta Reticuli star system coming in and visiting us because they like our mushrooms. I mean, I don't know. But people have theorized that these are extratemporal beings by the nature of time travel itself, or by the nature of gravitational travel itself. You do have distortions in time and space. So some people say they're extratemporal. They're us from the future. I have no idea. The evidence doesn't suggest that to me. But the more exotic theories is this idea of extra dimensionals, that there are these kind of perforations in our reality, in our dimension, and that beings and yet craft can come through. Now, I don't know the physics of it. I don't know if that's true. But I do know that the study the government did on a place called Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, where a lot of these phenomena seem to express themselves, they were doing so because they saw deployment. They saw tears, what appeared like tears in the sky, and craft and beings come through. Now, whether you believe this or not, our government did study this ranch for many years. Our Defense Intelligence Agency did. They thought it was a real threat. So my point is, I don't know. The more I learn, the less I know about UFOs. Are they just beings from another planet? Or is it stranger, like interdimensionals, extratemporals? I don't know.
Have you heard any great ideas as to why they flex in isolated situations? For example, why don't they come to a place like New York or Toronto and show themselves if they want to show their prowess? Why is it always in places where there's lack of footage or secrecy?
Well, we no longer have lack of footage. There's
lack of high resolution footage, let's say.
Okay, but that's another misnomer, because the FLIR-pod, the @FLIR-pod footage, it's not like an iPhone. Those things are targeting systems. They're weapon systems. Those are multi-million-dollar camera systems. They're just showing you a thermal, signature, because of they want to look for thermal signatures to see how these things are propelling. So if you had a normal camera, you'd get less information. So the footage, albeit square, black and white, and grainy, gives us more information about that vehicle, the Tic Tac UFO in 2004 off of the west coast of California, than if you had a normal camera. But to your point is, well, if they're here, why haven't they landed on the White House lawn? Why haven't they said, hey, we're here? And a lot of people, over centuries have asked that question. It's like, what are these things, and why aren't they presenting themselves? I would argue that they are. That they do so in a very delicate and intricate manner, that they do so to a variety of individuals throughout time. Obviously, if they wanted to show great power, if they wanted to show a great force, They could do so. They could shut down our nuclear weapons or turn them on. So there you go. Maybe there's a program in place. I would like to believe it's an educational program that over time we're being acclimated to this other reality. I don't know that to be true. Maybe, as I said before, there's a reason, like a prime directive, if you're a fan of, Star Trek, that kind of thing, or non-interference. Maybe they're just making sure we're not blowing ourselves up. I don't know.
Have you explored any connections between psychedelics and aliens?
Personally, yes. I love some mushrooms.
Because there are different classes. There's like the mushrooms, and there's LSD, then there's DMT, which is like psychedelic 2.0. And that one, apparently you can get to places where you can speak to other beings and other forms. And I'm curious if
I'm interested.
Same.
I'm interested in, the expansion of consciousness and what exists within our consciousness that is untapped. So, my psychedelic experiences have been beautiful. I never have communed with the aliens or anything. I don't know if there's a direct connection. A lot of people have these great ideas that, the planet was seeded from outer space on an asteroid by mushrooms to enhance, Homo sapien and bring them up to in intelligence. And I mean, that's a Joe Rogan theory. I don't know. I just know that people do draw that connection in that the expanse of our consciousness seems a little bit less limited when you open these doors of perception through things like psychedelics, properly used, maybe ceremonially used and not frivolously used, going to a rave or something. But I don't think they're the key, and I don't think they're the answer. And I think that if we were going to learn something from them about these visitors, we probably would have learned them thousands of years ago. Human beings have been doing psychedelics for thousands of years. So I wouldn't go jump and do a whole bunch of psychedelics to try to commune with the aliens. It's not going to work.
Why do you think it is that the government released some of the videos, the Tic Tac video in particular?
I know specifically why. They released reluctantly these videos because of public pressure on the inside and pressure on the outside. There's a number of people who worked to get these videos released. It's not something that the Department of Defense and the intelligence agencies freely wanted to release. Why give the public information about something that, one, we don't know that much about, and two, we certainly cannot control? It needs to be perceived as a threat from a military perspective until we can identify the pilots, the purpose, and intent. So it's not just like the government's like, oh, UFOs are real, here you go. There's a lot of people that worked to get that information out. Remember, if you're a fighter pilot and you chase one of these things and you go start talking about it, people are going to think you're not wrapped so tight. And they're going to take away your wings, is what they used to do, stop you from flying. No fighter pilot wants that. So now they're trying to make it, there's actually new policies that have been promised to make it easier for people to report these near misses, they call them, like close encounters. And if we do that, then people won't be stigmatized as much and we'll get more data.
So you think it's because perhaps they want more data and they just want to destigmatize it?
I don't know that's, I think they have way better technology than the civilian world. I don't think they need us anymore, for UFO data. I think that they can track something the size of a golf ball coming in from outer space. So I don't think they need more data. I think it was just public pressure. People know this stuff is real. They see it. Pilots see it. Individuals see it. I mean, it's tracked on radar systems. It's hard to continuously cover it up.
Do you think aliens have communicated with our government explicitly?
Yeah, I'm curious about that myself. I'm not sure. Look, it's step one time, man. Step one is the general public needs to get caught up. They need to get caught up with the fact that the UFO presence is real, that we are being visited on a regular basis by an intelligence that are flying hard craft that are far outpace our technology. And we think we know how they work. Our government thinks they know how it works. They can't replicate it.
But as far as you know, there's no documents that say that the aliens have explicitly communicated with USA or Russia.
there's nothing that I would concretely say, a classified document that I would say that's probably real. I have obtained documents that say as much, but the authenticity of these documents will always be in question because you can't track
Right.
the source.
And the documents, are they implying some sort of collusion between the aliens and the government, or is it something else?
Okay, so anybody that wades into the UFO world really, really needs to protect themselves from disinformation. There have been active programs of disinformation that have been admitted to by our government. So
Okay,
there's
as
a
far as
very
I know, there's Project Blue Book. Is that what you're referring to?
no,
Or is that
but
different?
okay, so this is important. Project Blue Book was it ended in 1969, supposedly. It was the United States government study of UFOs. Now, what people don't know is that, or a lot of people don't know, is that there were two UFO study programs before Project Sign and Project Grudge.
Sign as in sine wave or SIGN?
SIGN,
Okay.
Sign. Project Sign and Project Grudge. And then there's Project Blue Book. And this is the one that's very famous that everybody knows about, where the US government said, the famous saying where J. Allen Hynek, who ran Project Blue Book, said that one of the UFOs was swamp gas. You ever hear that? Oh, it's probably swamp gas. It's a very famous thing that people say to debunk UFOs. J. Allen Hynek, who ran Project Blue Book, later apologized for that because he knew the UFO topic was real, and he was mandated to, quote unquote, demystify the UFO topic to the public. So Project Blue Book was a sham. And now everybody knows that there are cases that they can't describe, but their mandate was to try to calm the American public.
Okay, wait. Again, sorry, I have to cut you off because I'm trying to understand this. So there's Project Blue Book, and what that was a disinformation campaign by the American government, or something else?
Ultimately, it's been revealed that it was at best a disinformation project, in that this was the official study of UFOs by the United States government. And people involved in that process, like J. Allen Hynek, later revealed that their mandate was to suppress the information, was to minimize it, was to come up with prosaic explanations. And this is what that term swamp gas comes from. Now, our government, the United States government, also told us that our study of UFOs ended in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
We now know that to be a lie. I told you about OSAP and I told you about ATIP. Those programs have now been acknowledged. So our government did not stop studying UFOs. Of course they didn't. They represent a technology that's far superior to what we have. We want that technology. Whoever gains the technology that is shown in these UFOs, they win. They win everything. It is a technology that cannot be competed with. It can be weaponized. If these things do travel using gravity wave amplification, if that's true, then this can be weaponized.
When you said that UFOs are just some small part of a larger project, what did you mean? Phenomena. What do you mean?
I like to say to the phenomenon, I believe the evidence shows me that UFOs is a very small aspect of a much larger phenomenon. Okay, so what I mean by that is that UFOs appear to be part of a larger phenomenon, meaning UFOs are kind of an auxiliary implication of a much larger reality. So this idea that what we're seeing are machines from other planets, I'm unconvinced. What we may be seeing is an alternate reality. Maybe it is something closer to, dimensional travel. There seems to be another version of reality that is occurring, and that somehow once in a while they perforate and they pop through into our reality. And this is not just from a cursory look at the UFO phenomenon. This is from talking with thousands of close encounter eyewitnesses who tell me that this is something bigger than just flying machines. To give you an example, at Skinwalker Ranch, The report is that a piece of the sky opened up like a tear, and out of this tear came beings, came craft. So UFOs is a symptom. It's part of this alternate reality, the phenomenon, as I call it. But it's not just about UFOs. UFOs represent this phenomenon.
What other phenomenon are there? Bigfoot, ghosts?
Yeah, I don't know.
That they're related to, I mean.
Yeah, I wish I knew, or I could stand firm in saying I know this to be true. Skinwalker Ranch is the best example of this, because you have UFO phenomenon, but you also have cattle mutilation, which is often associated with lights in the sky. So cattle mutilation is something, as an example, concrete example, cattle mutilation. Is this a UFO phenomenon, or is this a government experiment, or is this a private corporation that's going around and mutilating these cows and draining their blood in the dead of night? Nobody has ever been caught during these cattle mutilations that are homogenous. They are the same across the board. They're drained of blood. There's two types of incisions. They take the same things, the genitals, the sexual organs, piece of the cheek, and an eye and an ear. It's the same thing. So this is associated with the UFO phenomenon because the farmers and people that are cattle ranchers, they see UFOs oftentimes during these mutilations. So I can't separate them. So
okay,
again,
so we got UFOs tied with cattle mutilation. Okay, that one I can understand. I mean, I've heard of that since I was a kid. Okay, what else that's tied to UFOs?
What else is tied to UFOs? I mean, I don't know. The experiences are so wild, man. I mean, when people, get engaged with these entities, people have had, it's not just hard. It's not like craft come in there and no one's flying them. I'll give you an example. The Ariel School. This is an amazing case in South Africa. And, 80 kids or something saw these craft land in the field by their school. All these kids, the BBC came the next day and interviewed these kids with head of Harvard psychiatry, John Mack. John Mack gets out there. They interview the kids. They all say the same thing. These craft came down and they were little beings on the craft with these huge almond-shaped eyes. And I personally know two of the children, they were at the time children, and then now they're adults, and they were within meters. I mean, within 4 feet. One of them was in 4 feet of one of these beings. Bipedal being, wearing like a suit, a gray alien kind of thing, with these huge almond-shaped eyes that she said mesmerized her. This is somebody who's not lying. I mean, all of these kids saw it. Again, John Mack at Harvard Psychiatry went, and he was head of Harvard Psychiatry, and he went, interviewed them with the BBC. It's a historic case.
And what was his conclusion?
That they're telling the truth. Okay. That they saw exactly what they said they saw. You can't make it up across all these kids with the same explanations. And Liesel and Salma are the two females who were there as kids that I know now, current day. Yeah. And it has affected their lives. If you look at footage of them talking to John Mack on the BBC, and they're talking about how they were mesmerized, and then they showed them like images in their mind's eye, like a movie of the destruction of our planet and how we have to be more careful with our ecosystem and our earth, and we need to treat it right or we're doomed. Well, back when this happened, that wasn't a huge topic of conversation like it is today with climate change. So these children took on the burden of telling people what these aliens told them. So that's a good example of a phenomenon that goes beyond just the hard craft, right? And goes into the beings operating them.
Why did these, I know you're just going to have to speculate, but why do you think these aliens came to these African children instead of going to some places that could make a difference now, given, let's say, they're the CEO of some corporation that's exporting negative externalities in the form of pollution at a much higher rate than these 80 African children? Why do you think that they went to them?
Yeah, I mean, again, you were right. I have to speculate. I mean, I have no inside knowledge.
Yeah, but it's okay. Who cares? Let's speculate. Okay. It's fine. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Give me some ideas.
Sure.
Let me toy with it.
Yeah, for sure. So total speculation. I mean, I'm not trying to be evasive about it. I just really, when I don't know something, dude, I don't fucking know it. So here's the deal. These beings, these craft, these entities, maybe they're all playing the same game and on the same team. Maybe they're not. Maybe there's competing agendas. And maybe this is a learning process. Maybe it's so weird to think that we might not have even a most simple grasp on what's going on with UFOs and this alien presence, whatever this is. Maybe it's so much stranger. Again, maybe we're a commodity. Maybe humanity itself. In one of the documents that Bob Lazar read, it called us containers. Containers of what?
I heard that. Yeah.
Containers of what?
Mm-hmm.
Blood? Are we containers of souls? I don't even know what a soul is. What is a soul? So maybe one of the crazier theories, maybe we're containers for the maturation of souls, like a nice wine, and we're a commodity in some way, just like we would, make sure that our livestock doesn't spread a disease that eliminates them. We're being, these entities are being sure that we don't blow up our earth with our nuclear weapons because somehow we're important to them. The nefarious version is we're a commodity. The non-nefarious version, the positive version is that, we're a sample of life and they want us to get through our primitive stage of warfare and self-destruction and violence and hatred and racism and horrible shit so that we can thrive in a larger community. I don't know.
That was somewhat haunting when I heard that we're containers, or that the aliens refer to us as containers. Let's imagine it's true. That's just a somewhat terrifying thought. I mean, it depends on what you're containing.
Well, again, I mean, we're on real fringe territory here. And most people, they're worried about, where their next paycheck's coming from. It's my doggy. Where the next paycheck's coming from. People are worried about, keeping the peace within their own family. People are worried about not giving a loved one COVID. I mean, this idea, I think, is very important, that we are not alone in the universe, that we are being visited by an intelligence that's far technologically superior to humanity, and that we've been visited for a long time, and that there is a message being sent in some ways to some people. Don't fuck up where you live. And if that's the case, if that's what's going on, it's an important message.
But in some ways, it's also a fatalistic one, because it doesn't matter what we do. They may save us if it's in their best interest and they have extremely advanced technology. So why should we clean up the environment? They'll probably save us at the last moment. No, I'm being serious. If we're in their interest, our survival is.
Well, maybe their interest is not just on the safety of the planet and the safety of the human species, regenerating. Again, maybe there's a different investment that they have in the maturation of human consciousness.
Like some spiritual development.
I don't know. I'm not particularly a spiritual person necessarily. I'm not a religious person, so I don't know. I don't know. In conclusion, you don't have to take my word for it. UFOs are real, and enough evidence is out there for you to understand that. If UFOs are real, then that should make you so curious about what they represent, what alternate reality they represent. There's an uncharted territory, a mystery here that UFOs are a beacon for. But by studying UFOs and by really looking at the history of what's happened, the credible information, there is an alternate reality. There's a reality that is more expansive and bigger than what we know. And that's what's so exciting to me about the UFO topic. One day I hope to learn more about it, and I hope to get closer to the truth. But right now I'm like you. I'm just hungry for answers.
What's the single best piece of evidence you've come across in studying the UFO phenomenon?
That's the same question that I ask every single person that I first interview anytime I turn on the camera, and I've never gotten a satisfactory answer. So I certainly can't give you one. My best evidence that I have is my own personal experience and the people that have come forward to me who don't want fame or to be known and have told me a verifiable piece of information that I can't share with the public. For me, that's the coolest piece of evidence.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.